Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be going over one of the sexiest Paladin auras in Diablo 2 Resurrected, and that is Fanaticism. Fanaticism is one of the Paladin auras that is seen as the top, the creme de la creme of the auras. Not only does it give you damage, but it also gives you attack speed. But it doesn't just give you attack speed, it gives you skill-based attack speed. And that's one of the things that we're going to be focusing on for Fanaticism. Instead of focusing on the damage output, which if you really want to learn all about how damage output works, or what I like to call off-weapon ED. Off-weapon ED is a very specific mechanic, and when I went over the Might video, I delved really deep into how off-weapon ED works. And, I mean, I'll go over it briefly during this video, but if you want a detailed introduction into the way that off-weapon ED works, the Might Aura video is probably your best bet. However, Fanaticism is not just about increased damage. It's also about increasing your attack speed. And this is where things get really interesting, because increasing your attack speed is pretty massive for this particular ability. Now, you might look at it and be like, oh, well, it's only 36% increased attack speed. That's not really a lot. But the correct answer to that is actually no, it's actually a butt ton. Because it's a skill-based attack speed increase, not a regular increased attack speed. For example, let's say, for instance, I were to throw on an item like Laying of Hands, which has 20% increased attack speed. And then maybe I also threw on something like G-Face, which I threw a 15% IAS jewel in. That would bring me up, about 35% increased attack speed. The 35% increased attack speed that I obtain from Laying of Hands and G-Face is nowhere near as effective as the 36% that I am obtaining from the Fanaticism aura. Because skill-based attack speed has less of a cap and more effective usefulness in most scenarios. And to give you an example of this, let's take my character out real quick and just play around with some stuff. So if I were to go to Cold Plains real quick, and just attack some monsters, you can see how fast I attack, right? So that's pretty darn fast. You can barely even see my character actually even attacking. But the holy bolts kind of give away like every single hit that I'm landing, right? However, if I take off the Fanaticism aura and I put on something else like, I don't know, Might, you'll notice that my attack speed isn't quite as fast anymore. I'm still attacking pretty quickly, but it's not anywhere near as fast as I was before. And this is really what Fanaticism comes down to. It's not about the increased damage. It's not about the attack rating. It's really about the ridiculous increase in attack speed that you get from the ability. Now, sometimes you don't need the attack speed. Now, there are many situations where you might be in, like, for instance, if you're using a Grief Phase Blade, where a Grief Phase Blade is already really ridiculously fast anyway. And so if you have a ridiculously fast weapon and you don't necessarily need Fanaticism, it might not necessarily be your best choice. For instance, I recently put together a character that was utilizing things like Laying of Hands, G-Face, High Lord's Wrath, and by the time I was done, I realized that I was actually hitting the maximum breakpoint without Fanaticism, and I didn't even need it. In that case, you might be better off with another skill that puts out more damage output. Now, Fanaticism is kind of a greedy skill as well, because it doesn't give as much damage to your party as it does to you. So it gives 492% increased damage to you, but only 246% to your party. And this is one of the other weird things about Fanaticism, is that it's a little more beneficial to you than it is to other players. And in fact, in many cases, when you have multiple paladins running multiple Fanaticism auras, it's actually kind of useful to just not take off your aura. But if they have a higher level aura than you, they are going to overwrite yours and actually decrease your damage output by lowering your damage off weapon ED, which is really quite interesting. Now, there are several items in the game that actually have the Fanaticism aura on them. You can get Fanaticism in the form of the Beast rune word, which a lot of people will put into axes and use on characters like necromancers. There is fanaticism on the faith bow, which a lot of people will put onto Act 1 rogue mercenaries, which is very powerful. And most recently, they introduced the hustle rune word, which has level 1 fanaticism on it and can be put on basically anybody, because it's a 3-socket rune word that can be put in all weapons. So you can put it on an Act 1 merc, an Act 2 merc, an Act 3 merc, an Act 5 merc, and even the Act 6 merc. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have an Act 6 merc yet, but maybe one day. But basically, the Fanaticism aura is much loved by pretty much any character that utilizes attack speed. If you want to hit a maximum breakpoint, and what do I mean by maximum breakpoint? Well, every character has what would be considered a maximum breakpoint for their specific build. For instance, if I'm a Paladin using a Phase Blade, and my Phase Blade has 40% IAS, this would be a grief, then I would need a certain amount of IAS to achieve my maximum frame rate, my maximum attacks per second. Right here at the bottom, you can see that I'm currently at 5.55559 frames per attack, 4.31 attacks per second, right? Well, if I increase my weapon IAS, or throw in Fanaticism, like let's go ahead and throw in level 10 Fanaticism, you'll notice that now it says 4.4448 frames per attack, 5.2 attacks per second. Further IAS is useless. So what this is telling me is that I don't need any more increased attack speed to reach the maximum breakpoint. In fact, according to this, with just level 2 Fanaticism, I'm currently hitting my maximum breakpoint, which means I don't even need Fanaticism. I could probably just throw in a little bit of IAS, and 35% IAS is just the right number to hit my maximum breakpoint. So when it comes to Fanaticism, generally your goal is to utilize it to hit your maximum breakpoint, but not really go over it. And if you're in a situation like this Paladin, where he doesn't necessarily even need Fanaticism, you might be better off with a different aura in his particular case. Or you could just simply drop some of your regular IAS and throw on some, you know, like level 20 Fanaticism anyway, just for no reason. I mean, it's certainly not going to help you out because you've already hit your maximum breakpoint, but it will help out other players, your mercenary, necromancer minions, some druid minions, and things like that, where you can get a large effect from that. And that's really what it comes down to, is that Fanaticism not only increases your attack speed, but it increases everybody's attack speed around you, and everybody freaking loves it. I mean, the only characters that don't care about Fanaticism are the characters that are caster-based, like Hammerdins, sorceresses, like your fire druid or your, cold druid, your hurricane druid. But even then, they have mercenaries, and usually their mercenaries are affected by Fanaticism. So having a high-level Fanaticism in the group definitely is not harmful at all to the performance of the group. However, casters would definitely much rather prefer something like Conviction over Fanaticism in most cases. Now, if you're building specific paladins, let's talk about specific paladins that get the best benefit out of Fanaticism. First off is the Sacrifice Paladin. Definitely a very good choice for Fanaticism because Sacrifice is a little bit of a slower ability, and it definitely does get some pretty good increase in damage as well as speed from Fanaticism. Zeal is a very strong component for Fanaticism because, honestly, hitting that 4-frame Zeal is absolutely amazing and definitely creates a power house of a Paladin. So being able to hit your 4-frame Zeal is great. Vengeance can get really good benefits from Fanaticism, but it also gets extremely good benefits from Conviction. And so it's really a tug of war on whether or not you want to attack faster or whether you want to dish out more damage. And Conviction definitely wins in the damage category as far as Vengeance is concerned. But if you can manage to have both Conviction and Fanaticism on your Vengeance Paladin, then you're in a very good place. Conversion, I don't think that's the one skill that probably does not get good effect from Fanaticism, because you really want to convert monsters faster, because that's not helpful. Smite definitely does get a very good effect from Fanaticism, but Smite actually has such low breakpoints that a lot of the times you can end up hitting the maximum breakpoint for Smite without increased attack speed from Fanaticism. Usually just a little bit of increased attack speed here or there and a decent weapon, and you can usually hit the max breakpoint with Smite without it. But if you are in a situation where you just can't really afford to have a good amount of increased attack speed, Fanaticism can help you out quite significantly to get that maximum Smite breakpoint. But it's been my experience building quite a few different Paladins, even with weapons that are not really quite as fast as a Phase Blade, like a Grief. Even if you're using something like Astrion's Iron Ward, which is only a -10 versus the -30 on the Phase Blade, you can still hit the maximum Smite breakpoint with relatively small amounts of increased attack speed, and you don't really necessarily need Fanaticism to bridge the gap. But it definitely does help in any situation where you're having trouble hitting that breakpoint. And then, you know, obviously it does not affect Holy Bolt, does not affect Blessed Hammer, it does not affect Fist of the Heavens. It kind of affects Charge, although not as great as some of the other abilities. But Charge does have to swing its weapon to actually hit the target. So when you charge toward the target, and then once you reach the target, you swing at the target, right? Well, Fanaticism will help a little bit in terms of swinging the weapon at the target a little bit faster, which can sometimes help if they're trying to run away from you, of course. I'm not entirely convinced, though, that Fanaticism is the best choice for Charge. You might be better off with something like Might or Concentration in that regard, and just rely on a little bit of increased attack speed instead. But it really kind of depends on what you're trying to go for. If you're trying to just one-shot somebody in PvP, damage output might be more important than speed. But if you're in a situation where you're a PvM character and you're just trying to dish out as much damage as possible to a large array of targets spread out over a battlefield, then in that case Fanaticism might be the better choice, because it's going to allow you to hit more targets quicker. Overall, Fanaticism is one of those abilities that gets utilized on more than just the Paladin. Necromancer uses it, Summon Druids use it, Paladins use it, Amazons use it, frickin' Druids use it. I mean, just about any character that would like to have Fanaticism can have Fanaticism on their build if they're willing to put in the work for it. And speaking of the work, Hustle is the cheapest option right now with level 1 Fanaticism. And Beast and Faith rune words are pretty expensive. But ever since Hustle rune word has been added into the game, which if you want to check out that rune word, I do have a video on that. Ever since Hustle rune word's been added into the game, you can get Fanaticism fairly easily at a fairly low level on just about any character that you would want. And it's freaking glorious. I've played around with it myself on many characters, and I gotta say, Hustle rune word is a win in my book. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we can go over with Fanaticism before we finish here. It does have a synergy with Sacrifice, if you're interested in building that. So if you want to do a Sacrifice Paladin, you got to build Redemption and Fanaticism. So Fanaticism ends up being your choice for a Sacrifice Paladin anyway. I know I was talking about it's probably the one you want to choose, but it's, since you got to build it to build up the damage of Sacrifice, it probably is the one that you want to use. And it's going to give you a pretty nice speed bump for Sacrifice. Sacrifice has been fixed, by the way, if you're interested in running a Sacrifice Paladin and didn't really quite enjoy it in the past. There was a lot of bugs involved in Sacrifice, and it's important to note that if you are going to build a Fanaticism Sacrifice Paladin, Sacrifice has had most of the bugs, if not all of them, fixed, and it actually works a hell of a lot better than it used to in the past. They also made it so that the damage to self actually decreases as you level the skill. So by the time that you max it out and you get your nice plus to skills running, Sacrifice actually doesn't really do that much damage to you at all. And of course it doesn't cost any mana, which is absolutely beautiful. I think that's pretty much it. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. And why don't you speed over to the like button and hit it before we leave. And as always, keep watching.